Hi, I'm Kit, and I've been a full-time artist and backpacker for several years now, and I thought it could be fun to finally document a bit of what that's been like for an artist trying to make a living while on the road. I also kind of just want an excuse to experiment with some video making, as it's always been something I've been really interested in, so we'll see how it goes. Oh, and greetings from Guatemala. So this video is meant to serve as a bit of an introduction to this channel and all the things to hopefully come from it. I'm intending for the majority of my videos to focus on my art making process, but to also show how I manage a full-time art career with the limited supplies and resources I have access to while backpacking in foreign countries. It's of course not the easiest way to live, but it certainly has its many upsides to it as well, and so I want to show how it is absolutely possible to do it, if you're determined enough and fine with constantly being thrown into many new, uncomfortable, and very inconvenient situations. But hey, isn't life just one big inconvenient situation? In all seriousness, I want to show it is possible, even for a highly introverted artist such as myself. And even for those who aren't even interested in traveling, I hope I can also show those with already limited access to fancy, expensive art supplies, a beautiful private semi-art studio, and for those who don't even have access to all the convenient resources typically used and needed for an art career, that it is still possible to create and sell your own art, no matter where you are in the world. Okay, so onto the art part. Big shocker here, I'm a traveling artist who isn't a landscape or plein air painter. No, unfortunately, I'm just another boring artist who likes to find a secluded place, be it a cafe or a little temporary apartment, so I can paint weird little imaginary things all day. I figured we can paint the tail end of this commission together while I ramble about my method of painting on the road. And so you can get a feel for the type of paintings I make, along with seeing the amount of detail that goes into these tiny paintings of mine. This is actually the main reason I started this channel, as it takes me a long time to make these paintings with my method, so I've decided I might as well make the most of this time and finally document some of it. So, due to the nature of my lightweight method of travel, I am bound to a very limited amount of art supplies I can carry along with me, and so this is the primary reason why you'll mostly see me working with gouache and watercolor, as it's the easiest painting medium for me to carry around and work with on the road, in my opinion. Paints dry very quickly, which is convenient when on the go, and the tubes of the brands I prefer are small enough to carry around, among a multitude of other reasons why I prefer this type of paint. The paintings themselves must also be small enough for me to carry along with me in my backpack, as I am a carry-on only type of traveler. You'll also notice that I prefer painting on sturdy illustration board as opposed to regular paper, as it's very important for gouache paintings to remain flat at all times, and I find illustration board to be more manageable and easier to keep safe and flat when living out of a backpack in the most unstable of situations. Oh, I should probably mention how I pack all this stuff, by the way. This is something I may cover in detail in a future video. I'll just quickly mention that I travel with two bags. There's my main backpack that holds my clothes but also stores my larger paintings, which is essentially a stack of illustration boards held in its own separate pocket. And then there's my smaller backpack, which holds my laptop, paints, palette, sketchbook, and brushes and pens. And there you have it. Okay, back to my ramblings. So, why do I prefer traveling with gouache and watercolor? I do enjoy drawing, but painting is what I'll always be the most passionate about. And I do have a deep love for oil painting, for example, but I find oil painting far too difficult to manage with my way of travel. You know, with considering the drying time and additional supplies like mineral spirits I would need to be carrying around with me. And so I've had to make do and learn to love my current method of painting with gouache and watercolor over the years, which I still very much enjoy, and I'm always trying to improve upon. I actually did meet a fellow traveling artist once a few years back who chose to stick to oil painting while she traveled. And it was in Vietnam of all places, where I feel the humidity most certainly had affected her drying time for paintings she had been working on at the time. She was carrying an additional suitcase for her oil painting supplies though, which again was something I don't think I would have been able to manage with my style of travel, but I still admired her ambition to stick with her passion for oil painting while on the road. So it shows that technically it is possible. But for now, I think I'll stick with gouache for my poison during these travels. So this painting I'm working on here is painted with a mix of gouache and watercolor. Fun or not so fun fact? Honestly, this is partly to do with my occasionally limited access to paints in general, depending on what part of the world I'm traveling in. Most gouache and watercolor enthusiasts know that these two types of paints mix pretty well together, depending on the pigments and the quality of paint, of course. But the primary reason I often have to mix gouache and watercolor is that sometimes I don't always have access to the paints I really want and need at the time, and this forces me to mix and match. For example, here in Guatemala, it's actually quite difficult to find quality gouache paint brands that I like, at least in my current region. So if I'm starting to run out of for example, my Winsor Newton Cadmium Yellow Gouache, and I can only find a similar color but as a watercolor in the region I'm currently in, I'm going to have to buy that watercolor. And it's also because I don't know if the next country I'm heading to will even have gouache or watercolor paints available. Though I find quality watercolor paints to be generally more accessible than quality gouache paints in many countries, but obviously you can never be certain what you're going to get when coming to a new country. To clarify everything, if I had it my way, I would be loaded with only gouache, as I find this paint fits my style of painting a little more than what only watercolor can give me. Of course, I always do my best to stock up when I'm in a country with better art supply options, if I know my next few countries could potentially be limited. But this is one of the many examples of what I mean by this artist journey not always being the most comfortable. It's certainly been a rewarding and fun challenge so far, since I feel I've managed quite well up to this point. And I do enjoy the endless scavenger hunts I need to take on when arriving to a new place. You know, with trying to restock my paints, or looking for packaging supplies to ship my paintings out to customers. It's sort of a fun and weird way to get well acquainted with a new country or city. But again, this is also the reality of my situation, and can again be very frustrating to work around. Anyway, I think that's enough rambling for this video. My next video will actually be a more in-depth time-lapse of another gouache painting I'm currently finishing up. And this time it will be completely from start to finish, as I'll be discussing my full-blown gouache painting process in that one. So I hope you like this short but sweet introductory video of mine, and if you ever have any questions you'd like for me to perhaps cover in a future video, please let me know. I also apologize for the scraggly state of my voice, as I've been pretty stuffy this month. I also need to figure out where to buy a proper microphone, maybe once we reach Peru, which is our next destination. Anyway, thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you next time.